In 2020, during the height of the COVID pandemic, I became homeless. For several nights, I slept in my car before I was temporarily housed in a shelter where I would stay from October 2020 until April 2021. The following vlog was created in October 2022, 2 years after I had presented myself to the County Housing Authority for assistance. This video had previously been posted on my Monastic Musings channel, but I removed it because I did not feel it was appropriate for that platform. I am reposting it here on Just Joseph to document the mistreatment I received from my local Catholic community. I have very sad memories of this darkest moment of my life, which was made even darker when I was refused temporary assistance from the director of Vallombrosa, the retreat center for the Archdiocese of San Francisco. To this day, I am deeply hurt by how I was treated. Here is my story. You can't stay here. I don't like speaking about my experiences from 2 years ago because they were so dark and dismal. It was a time that I would prefer to forget. But this day, October 5th, 2020, is a day that still shakes me deep down within the core of my being. This experience involves the Vallombrosa Retreat Center in Menlo Park, California. The center is among the institutions owned and operated by the Archdiocese of San Francisco. Before I tell you my story, I must urge anyone who watches this video, do not contact the Archdiocese or the Retreat Center on my behalf. Having myself been a first-line worker, I can assure you that venting over the telephone on my behalf will do little more than possibly shake up an innocent employee. So I beg you all to refrain. I prefer that you listen, reflect, and share this video. As many who follow me on Twitter are aware, I was officially homeless 2 years ago. In 2020, I spent 8 nights sleeping in my car. These 8 nights did not occur consecutively. It was 1 night in June of 2020, and then 7 more off and on between September 29th and October 9th. On Friday, October 2nd, a young man from Twitter who was a San Mateo County employee met me somewhere and gave me some cash to pay for a hotel room and recommended that I contact a county supervisor to get access to some emergency housing. From the hotel room, I was able to send the county supervisor an email and receive a telephone call from a housing agency who directed me to show up as early as I could on Monday morning at the Fair Oaks Community Center so that I may be placed in emergency housing. After spending Sunday, October 4th, sleeping in my car again, I presented myself at Fair Oaks. Strict COVID protocols were in place, which meant that all of us seeking help had to wait outside for someone to come out and meet with each of us. A young man took my name and phone number and said that he would give it to a caseworker inside who would call me. Since my phone was constantly dying, I was brought an extension cord for me to plug in my charger cable. Eventually, a caseworker called me and took my information. She said that I would get a call from another caseworker sometime that day. The problem with my phone was now chronic. I could no longer rely on it to stay on without plugging in the charger cable, and the charging outlet in my car was not working. The only place I thought I would be welcome to charge up my phone and possibly get some temporary help was Vallombrosa Retreat Center in Menlo Park. I used to hang out almost daily at Vallombrosa when my dad was alive. It was a place I could go to get out of the house, which at the time was a mental health necessity. I was there so much that I had befriended some of the staff, including an administrative assistant whom I will call Ms. Y, who asked me to feed a feral cat and the center's rabbits while Ms. Y was away. On this day, Monday, October 5th, 2020, the center was shut down to in-person retreats because of COVID restrictions. The rooms lay empty. I presented myself to Ms. Y, who was working in her office near the main entrance. First, I asked her if she remembered me, and she said yes. Then I explained to her that I was now homeless and had presented myself to the county for shelter, but wasn't sure when I was going to get a bed. I needed an outlet to plug in my phone while I awaited a call from the housing agency. I had some frozen meals in the car, and I asked if I could use their microwave while I plugged in my phone. I also asked if there was any way I could have a bed for a few nights until the county arranged something for me. Ms. Y said that if it were up to her, she would have no problem with any of it. But since it was up to Mr. X, she would have to ask him. She did allow me to sit in the empty dining area and plug in my phone while I heated up my now soggy frozen meal. While I was in the dining area, a Dominican friar who was the spiritual director for the center asked me if I had enough to eat. I said yes, I just needed a temporary place to stay. He didn't have the power to make that decision. This priest also knew who I was. I assisted him at an Easter vigil at the Dominican monastery of nuns across the street. I was the cantor for the event, and he had stepped in to take over for the chaplain who took ill. I remember he was like a deer in the headlights throughout the whole thing, but I managed to help him get through it. He was a good soul, but not the one with the authority to give me a place to stay. At last, Mr. X showed up. He said that I should go to a shelter. I tried to tell him that I had already presented myself to the county and they were arranging for this, and that I could not directly present myself to a shelter. But he insisted that I go. He proclaimed to me in a gruff voice, "You can't stay here." I was given directions to this shelter where Mr. X said he had volunteered in the past, and off I was sent. I found the shelter out near the Redwood City Police Department. As I expected, the staff member who just happened to be standing outside kindly told me that she could not take me in. They could only take people sent to them by a couple of housing agencies. So it was another night sleeping in my car. "You can't stay here," said the man at Vallombrosa. Those words and the tone with which they were proclaimed still vibrate in my head 2 years later. This other bit makes the memory all the more bitter. Over the past several years, Vallombrosa built some new shrines and meditation gardens on the grounds. One very new shrine is dedicated to Mother St. Teresa of Calcutta. The shrine features a life-size statue of Mother Teresa that stands facing a tiny circular plaza around which are placed large square tiles that look like stepping stones. On each stone is inscribed one of the 7 corporal works of mercy. A stone that stood out to me was the one that read, "Shelter the homeless." I wanted to take a photo of that particular stone, but because of my chronically dying phone, I was unable to do so. I slept in my car on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday of that week. Someone reserved a hotel room for me on that Wednesday evening. It wasn't until Friday morning that I received a phone call telling me that a bed was available for me at the shelter I visited on Monday. I believe it was the only shelter still open during COVID. I stayed at the shelter until the end of April 2021. Recalling these very dark days of hopelessness and complete housing insecurity makes me shudder within. The harsh experience of Vallombrosa made it all even more demeaning. Remember, I was not just a bum from off the street. I had worked in the chancery for 10 years. I had been a vowed religious. I had been part of liturgies at the monastery across the street and in several other churches throughout the Archdiocese for much of my Catholic life. The staff at Vallombrosa knew me personally. The center was full of empty beds they could not fill because of the COVID shutdown. I would have worked for them if necessary. At the Vallombrosa Retreat Center in Menlo Park, California, its shiny new shrine preached in the name of the holy nun from Calcutta, shelter the homeless. Yet, it had been made quite clear to me, you can't stay here.